Yeah, this is just the second little part of this based on this Morgan Kelly article. And again, I've put a link up there for you just in case you miss it off the first part. I've put a link up to this Morgan Kelly article and have a wee read of it if you want to. I'm just going to finalise this little commentary from my point of view by quoting from his conclusion, which I think is fairly valid. So the first thing he deals with is basically an analysis of the actual bubble, the credit bubble, stroke property boom, stroke whatever you want to with the speculative, the gambling that went on over property. All right. So he analyses that, and then he says that the cracks in it were exposed and it started to break open. Because in all transaction there's a supply and demand, there's a relationship between supply and demand, and he said that the demand element of it showed the first cracks. I really say it's the supply demand, but it doesn't matter. It's a moot point. It really doesn't matter. The point about it is, it was all the whole thing was fraudulent, a Ponzi scheme. It was all based on indebtedness and speculation. All right, that's what it was based on. Based on nothing else. It wasn't based on production, creating wealth. It's all based on total gobbledygook, nonsense. And at the top, the three elements that made it up, the property speculators, they were probably, I think, about the most innocent of them all, because at least they were honest. They just said, look, what we want to do is we want to fucking work everybody over and get as much money out of it as we can, and we're speculators, and the muggins in the banks are giving us this money. They're actually giving us this money because they were playing a game. And what happened was, these middle class goons that ran the banks for the first time in their lives, like the government guys at the top, you see what was happening was, when the property speculators were making serious dough, making millions and millions and millions, they were buying off the politicos. It was just cut brown envelopes. Do you know what I mean? And nods and winks up at Galway races in the tents, and there was all sorts of shenanigans going, cheap loans getting given out to them and their relatives. So it's all cronyism, all cheap cronyism. All right. But from the bankers' point of view, who are supposed to be like the elite in the establishment of society, what happened was they got their kicks out of it through big bonuses. So it was in their interest to keep the whole circle going, and it was in the interest of the politicians at the top to turn a blind eye to it, because they were getting the kickbacks, as I say, for themselves and for their friends and their families through cheap loans out of the banks, right? And we all know that. We've seen about Charlie McCreevy getting a 1.4 million euro loan for a house down in Kildare. I don't think they produced nothing. Just your man fingers fingered and just give him the nod and give him the money. So you can see they were all in bed together, okay? And then what happened was, to say, it doesn't matter whether it was a demand side problem or a supply side problem. I said it was supply side. Morgan Kelly said it was a demand side problem. The thing became exposed and the thing broke up. All right. Now, at its core, it was still all based. The money element of it was based on the fact that banks work off a simple principle. Banks always do the same thing. They borrow short and lend long. That is how they make money. Banks never borrow long and lend short. No. There's no money in that. They always work off borrowing short from their point of view and lending long. That's what they do. That's how they make their money. And it was the same with this. It was the same formula. The problem is, at the minute, is they've all this indebtedness, and every year these bonds are coming up for renewal, and the guys that own the bonds out on the international markets want their money back. They're not going to roll the bonds over in Irish banks, because Irish banks are going to go to the wall. And that's the final thing that we arrive at. The final thing that we arrive at is what is going to cause the banks to go to the wall. And he says exactly what's correct. And what's going to cause them to go, not NAMA. NAMA will produce major problems. The NAMA headache is probably about 20 billion. What will cause them to go to the wall are mortgage defaults. They have got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of mortgages out there which are going to default. And that is what's going to precipitate the total collapse of Irish banking. And I have to agree with them on that. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out his conclusion. If I can pop it up here, you just bear with me a second, please. I've got to get it up here. And what he says is, as I say, here we are. Conclusion: In the last decade, the Irish economy has experienced an unusually large credit bubble. Lending as a fraction of GNP, he's back to what I said, the difference between GDP and GNP. GNP is a much more, from our point of view, a much more clearer index of our efficiency as a nation rather than GDP. Alright? Lending as a fraction of GNP increased from 60% in 1987 to over 200% in 2008, twice the level of other industrialised economies. It's actually up more than that, but it doesn't matter. In the aftermath of this bubble, the Irish banking system faces three interrelated problems. The first is that it has made large losses on loans to property developers. The second is that it has a large wholesale liability to international bondholders and increasingly to the European Central Bank through NAMA. The final problem is that it faces huge further losses on mortgages and business loans. The Irish government's policy response has been solely to address the first problem of losses on developer loans, because that's their mates, that's the boys that give them the brown envelopes, by establishing a state institution to buy these loans, NAMA. However, by ignoring the second problem of the large wholesale liabilities of the Irish banks, this project will inevitably lead to an expensive failure. This is a professor of economics talking here. That's heavy duty stuff. As Irish banks are forced to repay this wholesale borrowing and to shrink their balance sheets to normal international levels, the sharply diminishing supply of credit will lead inevitably to continued sharp falls in property prices. These falls in property prices will result in severe losses for the Irish taxpayer on the ill-conceived NAMA project. Thank God somebody's got a clear idea where we're going. Despite having pushed the Irish state close to and quite possibly beyond the limits of its fiscal capacity with the NAMA scheme, the Irish banks remain as zombies whose only priority is to reduce their debt, got it in one, and who face complete destruction from mortgage losses, got it in two. The issue therefore is not whether the Irish bank bailout will restore the Irish banks so they can function as independent commercial entities. They cannot. Rather, it is whether the Irish government's commitments to bank bondholders, when added to its existing spending commitments, will overwhelm the fiscal capacity of the Irish state, forcing outside entities such as the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the EU to intervene and impose a resolution on the Irish banking system. I seriously recommend this article to anybody to read. I think it's a powerful article, and I'll be quoting from it a lot, there's no doubt. I think it's just awesome, and it does not mince words. Normally these academics mince words. This is not mincing words, and I think he draws the right conclusions, and we do not have a pleasant future to look forward to. Sorry about that, to be talking like that on a beautiful Sunday afternoon, but that's the reality.